From our studios, this time in Tokyo and in Tampa. You're in Tampa. Yes, that's your background.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm in Tampa. I'm in Tampa.
Okay.
You can recognize the
Green
background. I'm
tag.
in Tampa.
Yes, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30. I am Philip, and I'm joined as always with my co-host Scott Swinson of Scott Swinson Creative Development. We're a little disjointed this week because I'm in Asia again, but we're still here for you, for our listeners, bringing you the top theme park news from this week and talking about why it's important. And of course, I think I'm going to go ahead and say the biggest news. It was both the biggest news and also I think the most important thing. So we're going to talk about it first, which is the Ministry of Magic details that were revealed by Universal. I am surprised actually that they revealed them this early, but I guess they want to get it out before Halloween Horror Nights consumes all creation. So that probably is part of it. But I'm going to read excerpts of the press release. We're not going to read the entire press release. We're just going to read the ones about the main rides, but we'll link to the full release if you want to read it. It says in 2025, Universal Orlando Resort will debut its third captivating installment of its wildly popular Harry Potter themed lands with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic. Beyond the world's ornate portal, guests will first journey from a Muggle park in Paris into the breathtaking spectacle of the 1920s. Here, wizards and non-magics alike will be enamored with the majestic grandeur and enchanting ambience of the city as they cast dazzling spells throughout the magical streets using interactive wands, encounter fantastic beasts at a traveling circus, and for the first time ever within the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, travel across countries and time to 1990s London using the Métro-Floo for a thrilling adventure set inside the iconic British Ministry of Magic. So I think that sets you up with all the elements that are going to happen in the land, the wands, the beasts, whatnot. But there's one ride and one show we need to talk about. The first is the ride, which was just hinted at, but it's called Harry Potter and the Battle at the Ministry. And the copy reads, with its unique combination of massive environments, powerful storytelling, and first of its kind ride technology, Harry Potter and the Battle for the Ministry builds upon the historic theme park innovation Universal is known for and will be one of the most impressive attractions to date. The adventure begins when guests travel by Metro-Floo, a unique mode of wizarding transit inspired by the iconic Floo network seen in the films, to journey from wizarding Paris to the British Ministry of Magic for a long-awaited trial of the infamous Dolores Umbridge. Upon arrival, guests will enter the ministry's jaw-dropping grand atrium and venture through other departments before boarding magical, omnidirectional lifts to watch the trial take place until Umbridge attempts to escape. Guests then join Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger, and a house elf named Higgledy in a thrilling chase that will propel them up, down, forward, backwards, sideways, and more throughout the Ministry of Magic as they try and capture Umbridge, all while dodging attacks from Death Eaters, rampaging creatures, and more. That's what's written in the press release. There have been a few interviews and some statements that have been circulating around. And basically, everything that the Universal team is saying about this is that it will be truly the most ambitious ride that they've ever attempted. And the scale really, I mean, they've kind of just underscored these elements. The scale is going to be big. I think one of the interviews mentioned that the smallest structure that, the smallest structure there is about the size of the largest structure in all the other areas that they've currently built. So the scale is going to be massive. And they have talked about how it will be really kind of never before seen, right? Technology XYZ, XYZ. I think a lot of people are liking it or kind of linking this to Rise of the Resistance, where supposedly it will be something that will have a story to it that will have different modes, as in, you would change vehicles or somehow go through different story elements that would progress through the ride. So this is a big deal. I mean, it sounds like they literally have saved the largest, biggest announcement for the end, which is just interesting because Scott, we have talked previously about how the whole concept of over promising and under delivering. And, so it, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely excited. And it's interesting that all this has been kept so under wraps. And it does seem like they're really the bet is really big, where they're trying to connect the parks all together with this one. So basically, if you like this one, then it encourages you to visit the other areas and whatnot. So I don't know, what jumps out to you, Scott?
Well, this was so to me. This was this was the ace in the hole. They knew this was going to be popular, so they didn't have to lead
Yeah.
with it. So in as far as releasing information, they knew this one was going to be the one that the vast majority of their this was not going to bring anyone new to the Universal properties. This was going to bring back the loyalists who have been enjoying the Wizarding World. Excuse me, who's been enjoying the Wizarding World of Harry Potter for quite some time. So I think this was their duh, and I think they just kept sort of baiting us along with the others so that we could bring in new people, bring in new people, bring in new people, and then they knew this was going to be a grand slam, so there was no risk in this reveal at all. Also, if you've been to Universal, excuse me, the Universal property here in City Walk, they do have a giant model of the entire
Hmm.
Epic Park, and built mostly by the incredible David Kaler, who, let's just give a shout out where a shout out belongs. But the or at least he worked on it. He did quite a bit of it. Anyway, um, the in looking at it, you kind of knew already that, oh, there was a show like thing and there was a ride like thing, and so this was basically just giving the details for anybody who's actually visited the parks. I will say, and I think that this kind of reinforces it, because as you say, in the area other than the scenic, which I'm sure is going to be stellar, there is basically a ride and a show. And one
Yeah.
of the discussions that is starting to come up here is there going to be enough for people to do to fill their day? And I've kind of countered that by saying, well, there's clearly enough, because it's not a bunch of small things. It's fewer large things. And this is true pretty much of all the areas that they've announced so far, is that they have a big anchor attraction and then a secondary attraction of some sort, is kind of their modus operandi. It's a lot more like a show park versus a rides park to me, because they are bringing back, as we've talked about on the show, they are bringing back a great deal more live entertainment. There's an area in here, the Le Cirque Arcanus, which is a live show, and interestingly enough, they even mention in the press release that it's really the first ever Wizarding World of Harry Potter live show. Not
Yeah.
100% true, not 100% true, but it's significantly better than the Singing Frogs. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
So I think that, and I have heard rumblings amongst friends and coworkers, etc., that it is going to be a pretty grand show, and it has already been compared to, as far as grandeur and size, the How to Train Your Dragon show that they're bringing over. So
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
it's going to be a big. This is not going to be, from what I've seen and from what I've read, this is not going to be one of those parks that you go and you do 23 things in one day, because there aren't 23 things to do. But your engagement with each one of these things will be significantly longer. So we'll see how that mindset, we'll see how that park mentality plays out. It kind of goes back, and you've heard me talk about this probably too much, but it kind of goes back to the first time I went to the Magic Kingdom just after it opened. And we would do maybe 4 or 5 things per day, because we'd have a queue that was 2 hours long, or it just there was so much prep time to be able to do the stuff that we did. So it kind of harkens back to that. It's not like I'm going to get everything in one day, even though there aren't a ton of things to do. So I think that's going to be unique to see how guests play into that, and how they respond to. We don't have a bunch of little things, but we've got less grand, glorious experiences. To be completely honest, it's sort of the way Disney went with all the Star Wars installations. Um,
Hmm.
those are much larger, more episodic experiences. Even Smuggler's Run, which is the
Yeah.
smaller, they're
Yeah.
they're grander. They happen in multiple phases. They totally immerse you in the world, But in order to do that, it takes a little bit longer. It's not just, walk through speed lines and then boom, look, you're magically in the world. No, they give you time throughout the entire queuing experience to live in the world for a while before you actually participate in it. So it sounds like that's the approach that's happening here as well.
I agree. There's a lot of really interesting parallels here between, I think, this specifically this land and the Star Wars area, but I think there's some well, it is interesting because I think people have already talked about how this is like Universal's answer to Rise of the Resistance, basically,
Hmm.
which is like, I go to Disneyland often, right? And that's like basically the only thing that people do in that area. I think once you've done, the other ride or, and then you kind of walked around. And I think it's very similar because, well, here's the thing. It's really similar, but it might be that Universal will pull it off better almost than Disney because this is kind of the Harry Potter area, I think is what put Universal on the map when it comes to themed
Yep.
entertainment stuff. And it feels like they're trying to do that again, but greater by increasing the scale and kind of and to your point about the show. So I didn't read that whole bit, but we'll have it in the press, we'll have it in the show notes. But
Hmm.
essentially people are saying it's like a Cirque show. It's billed as a full theatrical production that is like on the level of a Cirque show. So we'll have the full theatrics and be a good time. And then you're going to have all of the interactives and the wand stuff, which again, you think back to Star Wars, a lot of the critiques about the Star Wars area is that it was almost too immersive in that if you are, again, and we've talked about this too, if there's that school of thought where the immersion should duplicate a reality. Well, but the problem with that is that reality is pretty boring for the most part. I mean, if you're just going to go outside of your house and stand on the street, I mean, not much is happening to entertain you, right? And so it sounds like again, Universal is taking some elements of that, but they're um, making it more of entertainment focus. So you're going to be able to go to a show and sit in the show and watch the show, which you can't do at Star Wars Land, by the way. And then go and do the wand entertainment, which will be immersive, like with an asterisk, in that it's immersive, but also it's a it's a
Revenue
it's a
generator.
it's a revenue generator. I was gonna say it's a revenue generator, but it's also like I want to say like finite, or I mean like there's a way to do it, right? Like you know where the wand spell things are, and then there's a way to do them, and you go and do them, and you've done it, right? It's not like you're just sitting in a world and you have to like LARP and know which stormtrooper to ask for whatever secret random thing. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
there are instructions you can follow to entertain yourself.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from this, and I agree with you, Philip. I think that because I've worked on projects that were immersive, and I've made this same mistake and had to tweak it. You're right. To be totally immersive, if you say, okay, I'm going to transport you to 1990s London. Okay, well, 1990s London, if you're just going to stand there, you're not going to see much. You're not going to do much. So
Hmm.
you have to make it so that even those people who are not super fans know what they need to do in order to interact and engage. So you have to find, it's really tricky to find that balance
Yep.
line because especially, and this is especially true of Americans, I'm sure it's true of other people, other cultures as well, but Americans want the checklist mentality. They want to
Yep.
be able to say, I've accomplished A, B, C, D, and E. And if there's an F and they miss it, they get angry. So you have to make it so that it's accessible enough and intuitive enough to allow them to play within the immersive environment, but not make it so obvious that it's not that it reduces that illusion of freedom of choice.
Hmm.
So it's an interesting balance, and you're right. I think that we'll see that Universal will build off of that. I mean, they started that. I mean, when Wizarding World first started it
Yeah.
with the shops and the wand experience and the all of that. Not even talking about the rides. Um, they were pretty good at that. They kind
Yep.
of dove into that, and I'm guessing they've been studying Rise of the Resistance and that whole area to see what works, what doesn't. If you think about it, if you think about Rise of the Resistance, the one image that stands out in everyone's mind is the selfie that everybody takes in front of the standing stormtroopers. That
Yep.
is a gigantic, massive room filled with what appear to be a ton of characters, and it's overwhelming. It's really, and I mean that in a good way. It's beautifully overwhelming. And so I think it's interesting that even in this press release they talk about the massive size of the
Yep.
rooms and the buildings and Wizard and Harry Potter is a brand, an IP that is easy to do that with, because that
Yep.
appears in the films all the time. It's described in the books all the time, and so it's yeah, I'm curious. Like I said, I think this is their. I think they were waiting because they knew this was their slam dunk. They knew this was going to be the one that everybody went, oh, finally they're telling us what's going on here. Um, I'm like I said, being here and working with a bunch of people who are working on this project. Um, I am not one of them, so I have no insider information. But it's it's interesting because there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of concern, because it
Hmm.
is such a massive undertaking, and they have to make sure that everything gets done on time and everything is up to a level that is being promised by the time they open. Um, and like even the show, for example, and I can say it now because it's actually mentioned in the press release. I know you didn't mention it specifically, but when people read the whole press release, it talks about amazing puppetry, and
Hmm.
puppetry as a puppeteer, puppetry requires a lot more rehearsal than animatronics do. So I'm curious to see how they're going to get that all worked in as well. So there's a bunch to do, but I think this is the right announcement at the right time. And you're right. I think that it sounds as though they're finding a really nice. They're trying to find that balance of immersive being, we're just going to plop you in the world, or we're going to plop you in the world and you'll know exactly what to do to get the most out of it.
Yep. Yep. And we'll move on, but I just the last thing I'm going to mention about this is it's so interestingly circular, and I'm never sure how much of this is by design, but it's like to recap, Universal started off the immersive theme park trend back with Harry Potter, and now they're coming back to that in a weirdly symmetrical way to round out this last announcement for their new theme park, where they have managed to basically stay in the news every week. I mean, it's been like the year of Universal where they have just stayed in the news. And then meanwhile, it's like we're Disney and we're like Splash Mountain. And they're like, guess what, guys? We reopened Haunted Mansion Holiday early. Um and 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 now it's almost like a universal, it's in a weird way, like we're the ones to start off the immersion trend and now are coming back to it with a new land of their new theme park. So it's
Yeah,
just
I'm not
it's
sure. I'm not
yeah,
sure they ever left it. I'm not sure they ever left it, really, to be
yeah,
completely honest.
it's true.
But
Everything they've built has been pretty high scale.
yeah, yeah. And with Disney, yes, I agree that in the United States they have not had a ton of exciting information. But you've experienced it yourself. Outside the U.S., Disney has quite a bit of growth going on, and they're thinking more globally, I think, than Universal is at the moment. Universal is
Yeah.
trying to do what Disney did originally, which was bring everybody to the U.S. and, sorry, I'm going to specifically say it, everyone to Florida, because that is their largest installation and will be by far the largest installation once Epic opens. So to bring everybody to a hub, and Disney, it feels like, is now putting that focus on reaching out globally. So we'll see where it
Yeah.
goes.
Yes. Well,
Speaking of Disney,
speaking of Disney, yeah, our next story here is something we talked about just last time, and it's already been resolved, which I think is in and of itself is telling. But the Disneyland workers have ratified their contract. Last time we talked about how they had authorized a strike, and then they basically immediately got a contract in place. So the Disney workers' rising bargaining team reported that this week that the cast members it represents voted today to ratify a new 3-year contract. The deal includes a minimum base wage rate of $24 an hour as part of what the team called the biggest wage increase ever, with most cast members receiving $6.10 over 3 years. The new contract also includes attendance policy and sick leave improvements that give cast members more opportunities to attend to personal issues without fearing discipline. So 24 at the base, which is pretty close to, I mean, I had always said 25, and 24 is pretty close, and it's getting much closer to that living wage for the area that this is in. Those of you that are like hyperventilating at 25, just keep in mind that this is, Southern California, so it's a little bit, it skews, everything is skewed. Um, and the only thing I'm going to say about this, a few things that are interesting, is that it came so quickly, and we did last time talk about what a dangerous position Disney was in with it, and I don't think they wanted the negative press to be circling around too much. This wasn't like the movie studios when the studios could afford to sit around because they kind of wanted the strike because they had stuff in the can and everything. This is like they're coming into the quarter they need to make money, which is Halloween and Christmas, and they're about to lose cast members. No, thank you. So that was an interesting timing on that. And then the, and this is just me in my like business hat. I don't want to say cynical, but it's just the reality of it. You know what? Like paying more to your cast members is never, it's not, I mean, they're going to bill it as a bad thing, and they're probably going to get rid of more cast members as they move people over to using the app and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, I'm sorry. Who this is bad for is small businesses. That's who this is bad for. And that's speaking for myself, like as a small business person. And this is always the hard time I have with these situations is that what this does is makes it difficult for the independent attractions because they're the ones that are going to have the hard time paying to match Disney. That's I mean, wages and benefits are moats that the biggest companies can afford to pay because they get better bargaining agreements and they have better margins, and then it's the smaller companies like us that really, you know, it's a struggle for us. So as much as Disney is gonna like him and haw over this whole thing and lose their minds and everything, I mean, the reality is it's more like it's hurting the zoo. It's hurting, your local place that is maybe not even the zoo. It's probably too big, but it's hurting like your local haunted houses, basically those kind of things that are independent people where, then you're looking at someone and you're going, well, 24 an hour, and the cast members come in expecting 24, and there's no way that those business models can do that. So, yeah, that's it. That's my rant. Thank you.
Well, yes, I do agree that there is going to be it is going to impact the other attractions. However, if, as you say, the Disney plan is to raise wage and decrease number of employees, that is going to mean that staffing will become then available for the ancillary or smaller attractions that surround the larger ones. We're all looking right now, going kind of hopping back to the Universal story in Florida right now. We're all looking at is Epic going to be an employment suck? Are they going to just take all of the available staff cast members and take them on there? So I think part of it is that Disney has to compete with that. Now I have to ask you, Philip, this particular contract, is this just in California or does this impact Florida as well?
It's just in California because it's the union that represents Disneyland California. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm curious to see now is what the next steps are going to be in Florida, because I know that in Orlando, again, because of the competition that's going to happen very shortly with Epic, is happening now. Who are we kidding there? You've seen if you look online, you've seen the want ads. I'm curious to see how that's going to impact Florida as well. I've always said we have to be very careful of the wage increase. I'm putting on my business hat again, just like you were, Philip, because the wage increase is great for those people who are still working. But, companies, when this kind of thing happens, companies have to find a way to normalize so that they can continue to make the profit margins that their stockholders expect them to make. So are they paying 5 people $25 an hour versus 10 people or 8 people $18 an hour? Who knows? We'll see how that impacts. But if that's the case, the takeaway for that is smaller attractions, be ready to scoop up what they're losing, because you can get some really well-trained people who will need a job. And although it won't be at the same price, it might be they might be happy to see that happen and be eager to come and work for you. So
Yeah.
just it sounds like a win. We also said, by the way, I just want to point this out. We also said that a strike is something that neither side wants, and this just proves it beyond a shadow of a
Yep.
doubt. The moment the
Yep.
strike became a real thing and could actually happen,
Yep.
they found a way to ratify the contract significantly quicker. So I stand by what I said in our last episode, and that is, it was something that nobody wanted. It was an act, a little dance they had to go through in order to get to the point where they could quickly ratify the contract. So
Yeah.
again, I'm glad to see that Disney folks are making more money. I hope that doesn't mean that fewer people are employed in Disney California, but we will see where it goes. We'll continue to follow this.
Yep. Okay. We're one last story I try and squeeze in here at the end. And this related, but basically, I'm sure everyone has heard the news from Southwest Airlines and how they're phasing out their open seating. So basically, they are. It sounds like they're going to really move more towards the other main carriers, where they're phasing out the open seating and putting in assigned seating and also tiered seating and also red eye flights and all that kind of stuff. So in the press release they put out, it said after listening carefully to customers and conducting extensive research, Southwest decided it will assign seats and offer premium seating options on all flights. The airline has been known for its unique open seating model for more than 50 years, but preferences have evolved, have they? With more customers taking longer flights where seat assignment is preferred. The research is clear and indicates that 80% of Southwest customers and 86% of potential customers prefer an assigned seat. When a customer elects to stop flying with Southwest and choose a competitor, open seating is cited as the number one reason for the change. By moving to an assigned seating model, Southwest expects to broaden its appeal and attract more flying from its current and future customers. Okay, well, or you just become like all the other airlines. So I just thought this was interesting because, of course, it's related directly to our industry because it's travel and how Southwest is how some people get there, of course, but also the concept, like we just talked about at the top of the show, which is the idea of, I think you could akin assigned seating to like the immersion, basically. To me, it's very similar, where it's like, if it's true that this many people are saying they like assigned seating, that's kind of like, immersive entertainment. Sometimes people just like to be told, or like the safety of knowing this is where I'm going to sit, this is how it's going to go. Where they go into an immersive land, right? And they're like, this is where you activate your wand stuff, and this is the show that you can see at these times, and here's the ride to do. So I don't know. I mean, if that's too much of a leap, but to me, it does seem a very similar mindset where you're like, how much freedom do people want when it comes to their entertainment? And how much work do they want to do basically to be entertained, which I think is also something, a theme that Scott has talked about, where there's a tipping point where if you're having to schedule each thing on the app, which you do now for Disney, by the way, with the new Fast Pass thing, um, how much is it entertainment then? So I don't know, Scott, what do you think?
So, as a regular Southwest flyer,
Yeah, you
as
fly
a
Southwest a
Southwest
lot. Hmm.
as a Southwest A-lister, because I do fly Southwest a lot, this is going to most likely lose my business.
Yep.
So I hope Southwest is listening, because this will most likely lose my business, and let me explain why. Um, as an A-lister, I have worked very, very hard to get that early, and I've spent a ton of money with your company in order to get that early seating. Now, apparently, that's going to go away, and so therefore, I have not been contacted, by the way, to explain how their loyalty program is going to change and shift with this huge program. So I may be eating my words later, but as it stands right now, based on what I've seen, it is it's a horrible thing for me as far as comfort goes. It will mean that I will need, and it's all. I think you're right, Philip. I think people don't want to work as hard, because the reason they have to work as hard, have to work harder for Southwest, is they either have to pay the extra $15 to $20 to get early check-in, or wake up exactly 24 hours prior to their flight to get that early access. I get that. I understand that. But what Southwest is saying now, without saying it, is we're just going to charge you more so you can pick your seat. And if you
Yes.
think about it, that's what every other
Yeah.
air carrier is doing now anyway. At least the discount carriers, they'll say you can get a ticket for X amount, but if you want to pick your seat, it's this amount. And I'm terrified that that's the model they're going to go to. I want to point out something else for those of us who use Southwest on a regular basis, and that is quite often, as an independent contractor, we will get a last minute, gosh, you have to be in such and such a city on such and such at such and such a time, like tomorrow. So instead of having to get the last seat at the very back in the middle, what you can do with Southwest is get your ticket and then do your immediate upgrade for, $40, so that you can get the first 15 to get on in their seating.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can always upgrade. So it makes it so that those last minute flights will be significantly more comfortable for us. And they're now taking that away. So I am not the least bit happy about this. I do understand that if they talk about, these percentages concern me, because anybody who uses Southwest for business, I don't think they fall in this category. Anybody who uses Southwest once a year to fly their family to a vacation, yes, I think it is frustrating for them because they don't understand it and they just try to find the best price. So basically this means all Southwest is going to go up, and how this impacts our industry, I go back to find that balance between profitability and enjoyment, or profitability and guest experience, because this seems to me personally that this is ignoring that and taking away what has made Southwest so unique for the last 50 years. So that's my soapbox. That's my rant. And it's a good thing that I'm done, because we're out of time. So on behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30. And both Philip and I, over the last couple of days, have talked to a bunch of people who are listeners that we didn't know were listeners. So we're really, really glad that people listen to this. We're really, really glad that you get something out of it, and that you come back week after week after week. If you ever see us out and about at shows or as we're traveling, please come up and say hi. Please come up and tell us that you watch, and let us know what we can do better, because we're always eager to make this better for our core listeners, and for our new listeners. So thank you very much. And on behalf of Philip and myself, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we'll see you next week.